Welcome everybody to this live event with cartoonist Stellina Chen and Emanuele del Rosso. Before we introduce and we thank our guests for today's panel, we'd like to very warmly thank Voxeurop subscribers and shareholders for their support. It enables us to keep hosting such events. It enables us to keep publishing quality journalism and great cartoons. We translate also in as many languages as possible, but last but not least, we managed to stay independent and we are counting on you. Exactly a year ago, in January 2024, we were wondering and asking today's very guest how they found their inspiration in the face of natural disasters, unending war in Ukraine, the one in the Middle East, and the rise of the radical right. All phenomena that are still with us a year later. At the start of 2025, we have, in addition, Donald Trump back in the White House, Russia's interference in the Romanian elections, and Elon Musk's influence in British politics and direct support to the AfD in Germany. How do press cartoonists cope with this acceleration? We will ask Stellina Chen and Emanuele del Rosso to share with us the way they work, their concerns and hopes.
Hello, I'm Gian-Paolo Accardo, editor-in-chief of Voxeurop, talking from Brussels. So let us introduce our guests, Stellina and Emanuele. Stellina Chen, you're a freelance cartoonist, usually based in Taipei, but you share your time between Taiwan and France. You work regularly with no-news media like The Initium in Taiwan, Courrier International, Le Monde, France 24, Le Temps in France and Switzerland. You are a member of Cartoonists for Peace and of the cartoon syndication platform Cartoon Movement. You're also an author of comics, and you published in 2023 Dans la cour des grands, in the Major League, could be translated, which link we would share in the chat in a few moments. Emanuele del Rosso, you're a freelancer as well. You were born in Trento, Italy, graduated in journalism at the University of Groningen, Netherlands, and you run a communication company and collaborate with the cartoon syndication platform Cartoon Movement. You also publish regularly in Courrier International, Le Monde, and also Internazionale, Materia Rinnovabile. You also are a director of the European Cartoon Awards, and you're in charge of communication for the Display Europe syndication platform, of which Voxeurop is a co-founder. So let's start with the topic of our meeting today. Stellina, what did you make of 2024? And what were the three, let's call, best cartoons that you drew figuring last year, according to you? And why did you pick those cartoons specifically?
So there are a lot of cartoons here because we have some questions prepared and we'll share later. But three for me, I wouldn't say the best, but maybe the three that I like the most. It would be this one. So this one, it was right before the American presidential election. And so it was still at the time when the situation wasn't that clear and we were all thinking that maybe she will win, maybe she can, maybe Trump will lose this time. And so I drew this cartoon that I use Trump's red tie sort of as the laser in the room, and Kamala Harris just breaking the glass ceiling, and you can see that the floor is the White House. So I really like this cartoon because you can't really see Trump, but you can see his red tie everywhere, and I kind of transformed into a laser. So I kind of like the idea of not using Trump himself, because after a while I think cartoonists, we all kind of have the fatigue of drawing Trump, of his head, and luckily he has so many things we can just sort of put it in and just indicate that that's Trump. So this would be the first one. The second one would be this one. So this one was right after the thing happening in the Washington Post, after Bezos' anti-honest cartoon was rejected from the Washington Post. So I thought of, it was about the time of 10-year anniversary of Charlie Hebdo. And so I drew this comparison, although not exactly the same, but the essence is of oppressing the freedom of expression or media freedom, but one with violence and the other one with money and power. The last one that I like the most is this one, because 2024 is the year of elections, and probably more than half of the population in the world, people were voting. And in the age of nowadays, that when you vote, you're frequently subjected to fake news. So voters, you have to be kind of smart to like navigate through fake news. So I drew this maze, and this election was the European Union elections, and you can see the voter, he kind of have to go through the maze of fake news. And if you actually notice, so there's no way from the left, he has to turn right. So that's kind of like a tiny detail that I hide in the cartoon. But it's really like he kind of have to turn right to go to the ballot because the left is blocked. Yeah, so that would be 3 of my cartoons.
Thanks a lot, Stellina. There's more to come later, as we saw. Actually, Emanuele, maybe you want also to react to this, the 3, the best cartoon, the ones that Stellina preferred. And I'm asking you the same question. So what did you make of 2024? And what are your choice of the 3 best cartoons of last year?
Hello, everyone, and thanks for the invite. Well, cartoons by Stellina are always great. I like the synthesis, and I really liked a lot the cartoon of Jeff Bezos breaking the pencil. I think it just tells the whole story, and then it's an endless story of this corporate ownership that destroys pre-press and so on. So they're great. I think this one is probably the one that I like the most that I've done in 2024. Yeah, I mean, as a rule of thumb, but this is for myself as a cartoonist, I always like my latest cartoon more than any other cartoon. So it's really difficult to go back to 2024 and find the ones I like the most. But this one was very impactful. I feel like every time I post it, people react really strongly to it. And I mean, I think this is the topic for 2024 as well, and then contains many other things, but it's about radicalization. It's about right-wing, alt-right-wing in Europe and elsewhere. And then, of course, we will see also later what Elon Musk did and so on. So definitely this one. I also like to use movies and mainstream, let's say, culture to actually tell a story. And this one relates to The Shining, the movie by Kubrick, and the novel by Stephen King. So and it's a novel I like. So I also really enjoy drawing it. So this is one. Then another one instead is, and I do agree with Stellina that it's also nice not to show Donald Trump, and it's so recognizable from many other things that you can really do whatever as long as you use the tie, like she did, like I did in this cartoon. It works as well. And I try to tell, that was really my feeling of also oppression. So I try to occupy the image and just leave a tiny space for the Liberty statue to be there in front of Trump. And then it draws, there are in the past have been some cartoons that were depicting Donald Trump or others like molesting Lady Justice. Maybe you remember the ones that I'm referring to. There's one by Shapiro as well, a South African cartoonist that was really something that went viral. So I was trying to do something like that, but without the violence, but that would imply a certain level of violence. So this, I feel, maybe worked well because of that. So that's the second one. And then the third one, I think, would be this one, because of the climate change. With climate change, it's always difficult for me to try and find a new angle. So I try to literally move the view, so you see it from above, and then it tells a whole story. I like when I can draw a cartoon that's actually full, and there's a lot of stuff going on, but it's, I feel, in my mind at least, clear and also kind of timeless for this one, for example, because of course the temple of climate change denied is always full and it's always open, and I feel it's also it's going to be a topic for 2025 as well, with all the alternative realities, on different social medias, and difficult to find a way to actually find quality information for many users.
What are, in your opinion, the main events, the other main events that marked last year and that you didn't have a chance to draw actually, or no, sorry, that you made a draw about, made a cartoon about, but you didn't have a chance to show today? Well,
I haven't shown yet the whole invasion of Palestine and the behavior of Israel. I think that's also another story that contains multiple different stories. It's a political story, it's a humanitarian crisis story. So there's so many different angles you can take. So that's definitely another one that I've been drawing a lot about. The European elections, also that, of course, like Stellina drew about fake news and European election. I also had another view on it, about alt-right, and you see later. And then I'm particularly bothered by over-tourism. I know it's a very kind of like European thing to say, maybe. It's not even very European, but I mean, I really feel it, and then also being Italian, I look at my country and I see that it's just really something that is very impactful. So I did, I think, 3 cartoons about the topic. And then, I mean, there was Navalny and there was Putin and then a bunch of other things. So 2024 has been unfortunately very eventful. So there was really the possibility of choosing. I don't know. I don't draw everyday cartoons, and I really cannot keep up.
Thank you, Stellina. What about you and your other favorite topics that you didn't have the chance to show a cartoon on?
Too many. When I was making the selection, I was going through my database and I was thinking, I mean, it's impossible to just wrap up with 10 cartoons of 2024 because there's just too many things to say, and I really had a hard time to choose. But I think if I have to say one that I think that I would love to draw more, it's the movement of the Me Too, and also kind of correlate to the thing happening in France, Pellico case of the mass raping case in France, in the south of France, because there's a huge movement of Me Too again in the world, either in Asia or in Europe. And I think violence, domestic violence or sexual violence against women is a topic that I mean, people are talking about it, but it's just not being as much talking about as it should be. And personally, I drew also not that many because the topic is not that easily to be, it's not that easily I can condense my media of like, this should be the topic of this week, because usually there's something else, something happening around the world that would trump that topic. But I think that would be something that I would love to draw more.
Stellina, I think you had one cartoon in your selection on the Pellico trial. Would you like to, if it's not too difficult to show it, maybe?
Sure.
That's one also question I was asking myself. How many cartoons were drawn on that trial across the world? It was commented a lot, but I don't know how many cartoonists actually draw cartoons about it around that case. Maybe Emanuele can also answer.
This one was not really about Pellico, but I used her figure, and so kind of suggests it's Pellico, but actually I think it was on the day of International Day of something against the violence of women. And so I want to sort of just address the situation that all women would face, but not just Pellico, like not her alone, but all women who suffered from this kind of sexual violence. It is really hard for them to get justice. So you can see the justice for them, it's kind of a maze. So a lot of them would probably just give up. And here I use Pellico as sort of an example. And of course, her figure, I have to suggest that she had been through something. So you can see there's a bit of blood and knickers on her hand.
Emanuele, did you also draw on this particular case?
No,
trial?
I haven't done anything on the case.
No.
I have done some cartoons about women's rights in the past, also last year. I think it's another really difficult topic to follow because when you have a year that's very eventful, then you tend to draw cartoons about the thing that will also be published, I think this is a ongoing conversation about what the profession is becoming as well. Now, I don't want to get started on that because otherwise I would talk for an hour. But let's just say that being a freelance cartoonist means also taking a look at what happens in the world, at least for me, because you know that your cartoons need to be purchased. You don't have a fixed slot in a newspaper. So that makes it difficult to follow cartoons, topics that are not widely covered by the media. And that is the same. So it's women's rights, but it's also climate change. And it's also other types of, conflicts in countries that Europe is really not interested in, for example. Stuff like that is really difficult. And its topics are way wider, and then it's gonna be difficult to actually make them pass. Also, over tourism is another one of those. because it's difficult to put the finger on it, you know. So yeah, and that's just one challenge when it comes to not being a step cartoonist, I think. At least for me, I don't know if for Stellina is the same. I tend to also draw about what makes me angry or what really moves me. But then at some point, when you start having this career and you go on, you also start learning what's gonna sell and what not, which is a really big question about also what it is that then you're deciding to what kind of message you want to pass in your cartoon and how much you need to tone it down so that it can get published into some certain media and not others. And the example that I will give about this is about the invasion of Palestine, or the continuous invasion, and then also the war against the Palestinian people. It was really difficult, especially at the beginning. It was really difficult to see cartoons published about the topic because it's a difficult one for media to also, you know, kind of decide on how to tell it. And cartoons tend to make a way straighter point than written articles, for example. So yeah, we've seen also how it went for some cartoonists about their cartoons and accuses of anti-Semitism and so on. So yeah, it's difficult.
Do you want to comment also on this, Stellina?
For me, it's kind of the same, but sometimes I even also have to consider, because the media that I cooperate mainly with is in Taiwan, and the focus for them will be even more different from focus in European media. So a lot of topics that probably they wouldn't be interested, and they will focus more on, for example, South Korea, what's happening right now in South Korea, or Japan before there was an election and they failed hugely. So like when I'm choosing topics, I also have to put them into consideration, and very often that maybe something that I'm concerned of or something that I want to draw more about, I know that they would not even accept my proposal, so I would just choose something that I know they would accept. And of course that kind of just, you know, alter our cartoons.
I had just wanted to go back to something you said, Emanuele, when you showed your selection of preferred cartoons. You mentioned something about violence, that you chose not to show maybe directly some violence. I don't know how you phrased it. And do you think in cartoons it's different than in photographs? Of course, you can maybe choose also in photographs. Actually, you can choose a different focus.
For me, what's important is not to shock, because that will not work for how do you say that? You want to make people think. You don't want to make them shocked and then just having this like repulsion instead, you know? Whereas if like there one good example about this. So there was a cartoon movement exhibition at one museum in The Hague, and the exhibition was war, photography, and cartoons. So, and it was about Ukraine. So the photos were very, very graphic. But then the cartoons instead were almost not like all the cartoons were actually making a point, but without getting graphic, you know. Yeah, maybe you've got some blood, but not like a photo. And so that's what I'm trying to do, you know. You can imply violence, but if you show the violence, then you need to have a plan for that, because it's not what you, I don't know, it's, at least for me, it's not what I want. It's not for that I want for the people to actually see more violence. I mean, they know that, they can see that already. So you're trying to actually suggest a point of view about a specific topic, and making it graphic would actually defy the purpose, actually.
Stellina, what's your relationship to depicting violence? You have the same kind of approach?
Yeah, actually, I do also kind of have the same approach, which is kind of interesting. I also tend to kind of I have this thing that I would even shift focus and put it, like, for example, there was this cartoon that I did for I mean, it's not direct violence, but it's Trump winning the election. And instead of drawing Trump directly, I just draw him walking to bed, and the Statue of Liberty is in bed. So kind of suggesting what's coming. But also, like, for direct violence, I also don't like to draw like just depict the violence itself, especially for Israel and Hamas war. I usually focus more on the suffering of the people instead of drawing the violence itself.
Yeah, sure. We've seen that there are many cartoons about the US and Trump in which his, let's call it, particular relationship with women is shown as a kind of rape or violence against the Statue of Liberty. I won't say it's an easy one, but it's very straightforward and understandable all over the world, I guess. So a question to both. Now since we are, although it's still the beginning of in 2025, and it started with Trump's inauguration and his first burst of executive orders on migrants deportation, inclusivity policies, gender attribution, Green and Panama, annexation, rechristening the Gulf of Mexico, and dozens more that are already shaping a kind of new USA, if not a new world. Then we all saw that right arm Nazi, but not that Nazi salute of Elon Musk. And we're only at the beginning of 2025. So how does this new year look like for your work? Who wants to start on this? It's actually a question to both.
I'll start. So I'll share my screen then. So I feel like what you said, it's just the beginning of the year, and it has completely been dominated. I mean, all the media has been dominated by Donald Trump and Elon Musk. So I kind of put this cartoon as the first one, just to show that, you know, we're going to be hit by this big comet, Donald Trump. And this was drawn before the US presidential election. So I didn't even know if he was going to be the president. But already people are anticipating the effect. So I choose this as the first cartoon. And then this cartoon was the one I was talking about. And I think it's kind of similar to Emma's cartoon, that you draw Donald Trump's hip and you can see the tie, but you don't show Donald Trump himself. And also you also have Statue of Liberty being scared. So this is kind of the same concept, but just a bit different, that you don't see Statue of Liberty and Donald Trump, but you sort of suggest that he's going to bed and you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, why the shackles be open?
Because he's going to pardon himself. Like all the charges, all the criminal charges against him is not going to hold against him anymore. So basically he's going to bed with Statue of Liberty and all his criminal charges going to go free. As you talk about the Nazi salute, actually it's funny because this cartoon, I mean, it's drawn after the Citizen Ken. So there was this one shot of he was talking on stage, and the story is kind of similar. Like I kind of draw parallel of this media tycoon, and Elon Musk is kind of the same, although he's social media, trying to influence public opinion. And this Nazi salute was actually drawn before it actually happened. And it was drawn actually not recent. My media sort of found it and republished it before the real Elon Musk Nazi salute actually happens. So actually, it's funny that when my media published it, and I thought that because it's not often that they would actually by themselves actively choose a cartoon that incorporate Nazi salute or swastika sign, and I thought they would do that which means that they kind of see this tendency of Elon Musk really moving like to extreme right, and to the point that they would actually themselves publish this cartoon without me proposing to them. So yeah, this is kind of an interesting point of view. And this is the same, like Donald Trump being sort of just worshipped by, and that's how I see kind of it's gonna be just basically gonna be dominated by all of them.
Emanuele, how does 2025 look for you?
So every time I actually think more and more often about the cartoon that was published on the New Yorker. Now I don't remember the author, unfortunately. And then it's a meta cartoon. So there's a cartoonist in a room, and then the door opens, and a woman enters, and she says like, "Hey, dear, like the cartoon you're drawing about Donald Trump just happened." You know, so the sensation that I have is that whatever we imagine could actually be something that is funny, like, or that is exaggerated, like, I don't know, the Nazi salute for Elon Musk, but actually happens for real. So that's the challenge now. It's becoming how to make fun of people that are so absolutely completely, I don't know, like just like a different type of politician or a different type of public figure. I'm gonna show you a couple of cartoons about the year that comes. Well, this one is the one that I drew just after the day actually that I saw that Elon Musk had done the Nazi salute. I want to say it's a Nazi salute, so that for me there's absolutely no doubt about it. And I will say that it's not. The point is this. The point is that if you in your daily life make a salute, and you know in your head that it looks like a Nazi salute, then you don't do that. And then if instead you do that, you know what you're going towards. And that for me makes it a Nazi salute. So he knew what he was doing and that's it, Then whether or not he's a Nazi is a different question. But the fact that this is Nazi salute, I mean, for me, it's not a question. So I imagined, for me, my sensation when I saw that was like, okay, we've seen that all. What else is there to see? A Nazi salute at the president's inauguration. So that's why I drew this like this, because that's like you see that you have the Disney That's All Folks kind of graphic, so it's kind of like the conversation is like this is the point that we reached. We can just close everything and then go home, because there's nothing else that can be done to make it even worse. Threatening to invade Greenland, threatening to invade Panama, and then all sorts of other ridiculous claims that he made. So that's one. Then instead, so this is the cartoon. This is the last cartoon I made in 2024. Usually at the end of the year, I try to make a cartoon that kind of contains what happens when you slide toward 2025. So it's just like a bunch of trash just being dumped into the new year. And that stuff contains all these things, contains, extremism and contains wars and so on. And there's unfortunately some Nazi salutes as well. So it's very actual. So far it's going exactly as I imagine it will go. And this is the cartoon that I made to open 2025 instead. And that's very much how I feel entering the new year, So you've got like all these people just waiting for you on the other side. And so there's like all the conflicts and climate change. And then, of course, there's Donald Trump there. I think he's gonna, unfortunately, be at the center of the attention for the full year, if not longer than that. If anything, just because he's, of course, the president of the most powerful country in the world. And you can see that he's doing what's I would call like bully politics, So he just is very violent against anyone. So it's going to be in the news in Europe as well. And it's just unavoidable.
Actually, it enables me to ask a question I had about the profession. How do you renew yourself, especially on Trump, for example?
I think it's just about changing the angle instead of getting stuck into something, at least for the type of cartoons that I draw. Then if you have a fixed character instead, it's a different thing. But again, it's if I am trying to talk about a topic with a person that will be my audience, my ideal audience, if every day I go to this person and I tell the same story or the same type of story, then this person is going to stop listening at some point. And ultimately for me, the goal is making people think. So then that's what I'm trying to do, But again, you need to try and be fair towards all the different other topics. So if we're talking about topics, the renewal would be meaning that. And if talking about style, I just look at cartoonists that are way better than me and I try to steal what they do. And then I make it mine. That's how it works for me.
How about you, Stellina?
It's true that actually I've been drawing Trump for so many cartoons in a row. Like at some point I just get really tired. But when you actually look at even regional geopolitics, if I want to propose something, it's kind of a circle that you just ended up again in Trump, because American politics is everywhere and everything is connected to them and everything's connected to him. So it's really hard to not draw Trump. But then again, like if you just keep drawing him, it's just going to be all the same. So I sort of just like using different part of Trump. Like I would play with the tie or the hair or his skin color and just try to just sort of put his elements in the cartoon, but not to draw him directly in, otherwise it's just really all about him.
There's also another thing, if I can add, and I feel like it's something that is very much related again to what happens in the US, but I think from a European perspective and publishing in Europe, it's also time to try and reflect about what Europe's role is in all of this, because the conversation is happening on a political level. So we have like all social media, big tech, and how they behave. And then in Europe, instead, we don't have a public space about these things. And I think it is a very important topic. So sometimes my angle shifts towards, and maybe I can show you another cartoon about that since we're talking about it. It's the same conversation, but it's also from the point of view of Europe as well, you know? So in this case, there's Europe being just squished in the middle because of what I feel like it's happening and what the conversation in Europe is at the moment, that we are suffering from, like, not being able to actually have a position in the political world, political landscape. So maybe that it renovating passes also through this, you know, through the fact that if we look at American cartoonists, they're very American or United States centric. So they draw about themselves a lot, you know. And instead, us as freelance international political cartoonists, you try to kind of like give a overview of what the topics, what the main topics in the world are. But I more and more feel like drawing from a European perspective makes also sense for myself. So I try to do that a tiny bit more, also because Europe is in a more difficult situation than in the past.
One of the main topics at the center of Musk's and company campaign was freedom of speech, which Democrats in the US, woke supporters, leftists, and ultimately the EU were labeled as some kind of enemies of. Do you think there is less freedom of speech and less of expression in Europe or in the world in general? And also, subsequent question, in the same country, the US, a billionaire who controls the media, the owner of the Washington Post and of Amazon, Jeff Bezos, dismissed a cartoon by Antennas, which you mentioned earlier, Emanuele, a cartoon which showed Bezos and other oligarchs literally paying allegiance to Donald Trump. So long for freedom of expression in this case. Do you both reckon there would be more of those cases, even in Europe? So we're talking about freedom of expression in cartoons.
You know, what's happening now probably is going to happen more because social media, like you see Facebook and Twitter, I mean, former Twitter X, they're all kind of bowing to Donald Trump. So, I mean, I guess online, the virtual space is probably going to be squeezed, and the freedom of expression there is probably going to be influenced. But I feel like people always find a way, you know, like if Twitter is like becomes toxic, people find something else, some other social media app will come up. People always kind of find their way to their exit. As long as the freedom of expression is not oppressed by the government, not legally, I think we always just kind of find our ways to express ourselves. But of course, online spaces, social media wise, I feel like it's gonna be a difficult year in 2025. And what do you think, Emma?
I think it's a mess, and corporate ownership at this level on newspapers is a danger, and it should be regulated. That's my opinion about it. I don't know how to do that, but I think it should be something should be done about it. And the cases of newspapers reacting in, let's say, with a knee-jerk reaction to some problems with cartoons are actually way more than you think. And I have one example. Maybe I can also read you the statement from that newspaper. So this is a newspaper that is called the Latrobe Bulletin. So it's from the US. It's just a relatively small newspaper. So this cartoon was published for Trump's inauguration day. I don't know if you can see it. But so it's like it basically just says like the proper way to celebrate inauguration day, and the flag is upside down, right? So that's like that. So the newspaper published the cartoon, and then they got some reactions from the readers, and they were negative, you know, like, oh, the flag upside down, you know. I mean, you can have strong reactions to that. So what they say, I'm gonna read you a part of it, is that they say, we apologize today for letting such an offensive political cartoon slip through our editorial process. While political cartoons have run in newspapers, including the Latrobe Bulletin, for many years, this is a final example of how we feel they have run their course. As Americans, we respect rights and views on all sides, blah, blah, blah. We will no longer be publishing political cartoons because we strive to better the community, not divide it. To which, of course, I had the easy fit, and I even emailed them to tell them that, yeah, this is ridiculous. So this idea of like responding to controversy, apologizing, and saying, no, we want debate, So we will not publish cartoons, and then also even claiming that the time for editorial cartoons is gone. I find it totally ridiculous, and unfortunately, this is the trend, because even in the Netherlands, the Limburger, they reduced the amount of cartoons per week from 4 to 1, which means just firing cartoonists, you know. So the trend is not good, and the cartoons, they are the proverbial canary in the coal mine, right? And it doesn't mean only for violence, but it also means for censorship. So if the newspaper needs to cut something, they would cut the cartoonists. And if the newspaper is criticized for something, it's gonna be the cartoons, because they go more viral than the editorials. And people take the time to actually get annoyed by cartoons way more often. And then they just drop the cartoonists, you know? So this is a trend that goes hand in hand with the superpower of big tech and the corporate ownership, and it's just not gonna get better anytime soon, I think. And I mean, about Europe is a bit different, maybe, but not so much different, because the examples are also very much European anyway. You know, The Guardian fired or didn't renew the contract of Steve Bells because of a cartoon against Netanyahu. There's so many other examples. I am not optimistic about it. And I also want to say, well, I left X, of course. Of course, it's not even true, because you can also argue that you don't want to leave a place, because then otherwise you live in your own bubble and everybody lives in their own bubble, and then we just talk to each other, to the people that agree with us. But I left it because of Elon Musk's behavior. But what about Meta? And what about their behavior, you know? And then if you want to stay ethically pure, then you should just publish your cartoons for yourself, and then maybe hope that some newspapers will pick them up, or, you know. So it's just really difficult. We need to live with that. I don't know.
It was one of the questions we had about self-censorship, and maybe whether you have experienced something of the like, Stellina, maybe, or Emanuele, either in Europe or somewhere else in one of your publications.
I have to say, like, actually, the media that I work with, they kind of give me like a very big freedom, sort of free range. In terms of choosing topics, they rarely tell me what not to draw. There's only just like, they have, like, you know, abundant source of editorial pieces that they could just accompany my cartoon, something that they can promote with. So they would probably give me a preferential topics, but they rarely tell me what not to draw. So I rarely self-censored, which is kind of like it's lucky to be a cartoonist, not that you don't have to self-censor. So yeah, I think working with the media, I rarely self-censored. But just to react to what Emma said before, for what you said, that cartoonist space is shrinking, definitely. And I think, unfortunately, not just from the big corporation like base of freedom of expression, especially on cartoonists, but also because they're actually running out of money. Like one of the cartoons publication in France, Ciné, they are closing down because they run out of money, and probably because, you know, there are less and less readers, or there's just the space for cartoons is just shrinking everywhere.
Sounds really paradoxical that public figures, like the ones we mentioned earlier, basically can say and sometimes do whatever they want, while cartoonists are more and more subject to censorship, and this in an environment where free speech seems to be the absolute major goal. But apparently you seem to be able to cope one way or another with it, right?
I mean, you just do. I mean, I love doing cartoons, you know. So I think in a vacuum, I would still do cartoons. So it's really just not. That's just what it is. But then there is I mean, there are many dynamics and many factors to take into consideration. Will it sell? And then I also publish. I have some steady slots in some newspapers. It was also in Italy, in a local newspaper, by the way, in Italy. They never gave me any problem, and they published a lot of cartoons that other media, instead way bigger, would not, I bet, publish, you know. So that's interesting. For them, the dynamic is more like, if it's Italian news, then they started to get a bit more nervous about it. So when it's international, it's fine, because I mean, that's also about what readers find consequential for them, you know, for themselves. yeah, I don't know. The profession is just what it is at the moment. So I'm working on a big project with many stories of cartoonists now, because I also did you know that I need also a podcast about it and so on. So I've been a journalist. I also do that. So I tell those stories. So I'm re-interviewing some cartoonists, and I am also going deep into like cartoonist cases of like cartoonists being jailed or being prosecuted and so on. And yeah, it doesn't look great, you know, it really doesn't. So if you look at the trend, it's not great. I don't know, maybe at the end of what I'm doing, I will have a clearer view or maybe an idea of what to do about it. But at the moment, I do not.
Okay, thank you. I have maybe one last question just before we open the microphone. So please, our audience, you prepare your questions. We have another maybe almost quarter of an hour. The last question is, of course, concerning the 10th anniversary of the attacks of Charlie Hebdo on Charlie Hebdo. And since then, what has changed in the way cartoonists work? And do you still feel the impact of the event in your work and that of your colleagues? Is a question to both of you. Thank you.
I mean, I have to say honestly that Charlie Hebdo, the events, when it started, I haven't even started drawing. And of course, I mean, I know about it. I started drawing since 2017. So the impact for me, of course, there is an impact, but especially if it has to reach Taiwan, it's a bit far-fetched. But then actually, it's not like we don't care about it. During the 10th anniversary, we have actually a national public TV that had a team in Paris to cover the news. But in terms of like what it would affect my work, I wouldn't say a lot that you know, in terms of media in Taiwan.
Thank you, Stellina and Emanuele.
I think it changed nothing. Unfortunately, that's just my perception. So I was at the beginning of my career as a cartoonist when Charlie Hebdo happened. So I was studying journalism in Groningen. And well, I did my cartoon about it. My cartoons were very, very, very bad until like recently. So then, of course, it didn't get published, but I did it because I cared about the topic. But I remember clearly, you know, like all the political leaders standing with the arms crossed, you know, and like just doing this like human chain, and then Charlie, Je suis Charlie, and so on. I mean, I watched. There was a documentary out some weeks ago about the 10th anniversary in Belgium, and you see these images, and in the line of politicians, there's like Netanyahu, Orban, you know, they're all there, and they are still there now. And I mean, nothing changed. There's more censorship and more instability, and I definitely appreciate that these type of anniversaries are remembered, and they are quote unquote celebrated, you know. But then when then you go to the facts and what was done, to my knowledge, it was not much, you know. I mean, Kak is here, and he was in the documentary as well, so maybe he can tell us what changed in France, you know, and in terms of political cartoons. But yeah, I don't. I'm not particularly positive. I still have fun when I draw, you know, but I don't. I don't know how it's gonna go. I think in the near future it's gonna be getting worse before it gets better, maybe.
Okay, here I am again. Thank you very much to both of you. I think it's time to wrap up, even though we probably have many more questions. But thank you very much, and thanks everybody for attending and participating in this event. And thank you so much, Stellina and Emanuele, for being with us today. If you enjoyed this event, please share the next one on your social networks. Keep posted for the next live in a month about probably the anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And Gian-Paolo, I'll let you give you the final words.
So many thanks again to our subscribers and shareholders who make this possible, and to all others, don't forget to subscribe to our weekly newsletter and follow us on social networks, at least the ones where we still are present on, meaning not anymore X. And please consider, of course, subscribing or donating to support our work. You can register through our weekly newsletter in the link that is going to be shared right now in the chat. Meanwhile, thanks again to everybody. Bye-bye, and until next time.